We now will call the City Council meeting to order. If we can all pay attention to Councilman Mays and follow to the invocation to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all rise.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to welcome Josh Skelly, who is the student pastor from Topeka Baptist Church, to provide tonight's invocation.
Let's pray. God, thank you for just an incredible day, and we thank you for your amazing love and your incredible grace. God, I do thank you for providing for our daily needs, and God, I do pray for wisdom and for clarity for our city leaders as they make decisions for our city. And God, I pray for safety and protection for our first responders, for our police officers, for our firefighters, for our paramedics. God, that you give them wisdom, that you give them safety, that they would return home safely to their families. We pray these all in your Son's name. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a few proclamations, so if you would just give me 1 second to start moving forward as we recognize the crew from the St. Patrick's Square. Wonderful. If Councilwoman Hiller, who happens to be the Grand Marshal for the St. Patrick's Day Parade, would join us, please, as I read this proclamation. So whereas March 17th celebrates St. Patrick's Day, honoring the patron saint known for spreading Christianity throughout Ireland as a missionary during the 5th century, and whereas the city of Topeka is greatly enriched by countless persons of Irish descent who have made Topeka their home, and whereas Topeka residents treasure the Irish culture and traditions that have become a part of Topeka's heritage, whereas the citizens of Topeka and surrounding communities have a long-standing tradition of celebrating St. Patrick's Day with an annual parade, sing-along mass, Irish food and music, not feuds. Whereas St. Patrick's Day 2018 parade will be celebrated in downtown Topeka on Saturday, March 17th, where all are welcome and where everyone is Irish. Yes, absolutely. Now, therefore, I, Michelle de la Isla, Mayor of Topeka, do hereby proclaim March 13, the area of 8th Street between Kansas Avenue and Harrison Street in downtown Topeka to be known as St. Patrick's Square. So if you would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor. First, the Irish Fest Committee would like to thank you very much for the proclamation and for St. Patrick's Square. And yes, we have a big event taking place this Saturday starting at 8 o'clock with a mass, 9 o'clock with a fun run and a 5K, and then on for entertainment, Irish food, whiskey tasting, and just a whole day full of fun. So thank you very much, and we hope to see all the council members there.
Wonderful. And if all of us would stay here, because tonight is a very special night. Councilwoman, could you pass me that proclamation? For those of you who knew my Fairy March mother, March Heaney, she was one of the acting members in starting this tradition in the city of Topeka. So as a double blessing, we're not only going to celebrate the definition of the St. Patrick's Square on Kansas Avenue, but if Marge's family and friends could please come up. Nancy, you too? So, this reads, whereas Marge Heaney was born February 5th, 1926, and Barney Heaney was born March 6th, 1924, and whereas Marge and Barney Heaney relocated to Topeka to Kansas Territory in 1956, where I can assure you they left Topeka a different place because of their energy. Whereas Marge and Barney Heaney were active community-wide servants in the community who devoted their lives to the beautification of the city of Topeka, the access of musical instruction to children, and the appreciation of music for individuals of all ages. And whereas Marge and Barney Heaney were philanthropists who were engaged in the area of women empowerment through Marge's participation in support of the Women's Fund with Barney's support. Whereas the city of Topeka today enjoys a celebration of 39 years of the St. Patrick's Day Parade, and great thanks to them being a part of the founding members of this group. Now therefore I, Michelle de la Isla, Mayor of the city of Topeka, with great honor, by the way, do hereby proclaim March 17 as Marge and Barney Heaney Day. We have a special treat in their honor. Thank you very much. Would you like to say anything?
Just that this is a great honor for not only our family, but grandmother and granddad, I'm sure, are looking or whatever. Maybe they're standing right here. I don't know. But either way, this is beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. All right, we proceed with the regular meeting. There are no presentations today, so we are to be followed by the roll call. I will say that Councilwoman Ortiz is not here today. She is not feeling well, so our thoughts go with her. City Clerk?
Mayor De La Isla,
Here.
Council Members Hiller,
Here.
Clear, Ortiz, Emerson,
Here.
Padilla,
Here.
Jensen,
In Japanese, I'm presento.
Mays,
Here.
Cohen,
Here.
and Lesser.
Here.
We now proceed to appointments. We have an appointment, if the clerk would read.
A is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Veronica Padilla to the Civil Service Commission to fill an unexpired term ending January 5, 2020.
At this moment, the mayor doesn't vote in this area. It's what is the pleasure of the council? Councilwoman Clear moves to approve. Deputy Mayor Jensen seconds. We now, if there's no discussion on the item, we would proceed to the voting.
We have 7 yes with 1 abstention of Mr. Padilla.
7 having voting yes, the motion passes. Could everybody please help me congratulate and welcome Ms. Veronica Padilla? I think it's pretty apparent, but for those of you that don't know, the reason that Councilman Padilla abstains is because that is his lovely bride of over 50 years who we celebrated last week. Ms. Padilla, is a great honor to have you here. For many of you that do not know Ms. Padilla, she has been active with LULAC, with many organizations. She was instrumental in starting help to start the Latino Leadership Collaborative. And she is also very well known at the Washington, D.C. level as a past president of the national organization MANA. Ronnie has been working with MANA de Topeka for many years, and her contributions to this community are ceaseless. So thank you for continuing to serve our city. At this point, we move forward with the consent agenda, if the clerk would read.
A is approval of a workers' compensation settlement for Billy Casey in the amount of $30,000 for injuries sustained while engaged in normal work duties. B is approval of a workers' compensation settlement for Brian Hill in the amount of $125,000 for injuries sustained while engaged in normal work duties. C are minutes of the regular meeting of March 6, 2018, and there is a list of open after midnight applications, and staff is recommending approval.
What is the council's pleasure for the consent? Councilmember Cohen moves. Councilwoman Clear seconds. Is there any discussion with regards to the consent agenda? Seeing none, we proceed with the voting.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voting yes, the consent agenda passes. It seems that city manager looked at our healthy discussions, and there are no action items this week in the agenda. And we move now to the non-action items, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion of the proposed 2019-2028 capital improvement plan and the 2019 to 2021 capital improvement budget.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, Nick Hawkins, our Budget and Performance Manager, will make a presentation to start off the discussion relative to our 2019 through 2028 capital improvement plan. After that, obviously, we'll answer questions on the staff as to the various projects or issues that you may want to discuss relative to the capital improvement plan. Nick?
Well, good evening, Mayor, members of the council. As the city manager said, tonight is an opening discussion on the 2019 to 2028 capital improvement plan. I'm going to give a brief introduction on the process, then I'll hand it over to Jason Peak, our Public Works Director, to talk about some streets and facilities projects, and then I'll close out highlighting some of the other projects. Next week, we will talk about utilities projects in the CIP. And then, if all goes well, we'll have adoption of the capital improvement plan on April 3rd, which would be the meeting following the 20th. Before I get started, I just want to really quickly recognize Ted Clemens, who is our Assistant Budget Manager and has coordinated this whole process. He's buried in his laptop, ready to take notes for us today. But I wanted to recognize all the work that he's put in. To the capital improvement plan. This is, I think, the 3rd year that he's worked on it. He's shepherded all the staff through a new software for keeping track of the CIP, but has just, I think, done a tremendous job in putting this together, and so I really want to thank him for his work on that. So moving on, just talking a little bit about the process. This is the 2nd year that we're doing a 10-year CIP, and that's keeping in line with best practices. Allows us to look ahead beyond kind of the traditional 5 years and make sure that we're addressing all the upcoming needs for the city. We do this process as per the CIP policy before we adopt the operating budget, and again, that gives us the opportunity to cement all these capital projects that we'll be talking about tonight in the budget, so that when we get to that part, it's already completed. Kind of along the lines of that, we have the CIP is broken out into 3 sections. We have the first 3 years of the plan, which are considered the capital improvement budget, and those are projects that are ready to go and ready to be implemented day one, basically. And those are things that, once approved, the staff can start working on those projects. Then we have a 5-year look at the CIP, and we have individual project sheets for each one of those projects in there. And you can look on page 7 is where you can see a summary of all the projects that are in the first 5 years of the CIP. And then we also have years 6 through 10, which are really just a funding summary of all the projects that are what we consider kind of the out years. Finally, on the last couple pages of the book, you'll see a future funding list, which are projects that are needed, but we don't quite have the funding recognized for those yet. We've had a number of different public engagements over the last month. So starting with our CIP open house on February 5th. That Saturday we had a bus tour where we, with members of council as well as neighborhood leaders and a few members of the media, went through and highlighted several of the projects that we'll be discussing tonight and next week. And then we'll have some online engagement. So right now the book is published on the city's webpage. You can go to topeka.org/CIP and find it there. It's also on the ribbon on the front page of topeka.org. So a couple different looks at least the first 5 years of the CIP. So the first is funding sources. So you can see we have a fairly diverse stream of funding for the capital improvements projects. The largest part being revenue bonds, which those are primarily utilities projects, and we'll talk about those next week. A couple other highlights, we'll be talking about GEO bond projects tonight. Pretty much everything that's not orange we'll be talking about tonight. You can see the citywide half-cent sales tax that represents 17% of the total 5-year CIP. As we've discussed over the past several weeks, that is up for renewal. For the purposes of this CIP, we are projecting that is passed by the voters in the same form that it is today. So looking at existing infrastructure within the city. Second look, we have several different types of projects that we include in the capital improvement plan. Again, you can kind of see half of that being utilities, which we'll talk about next week, and then broken out, streets being the second largest, about a third of that, followed by facilities, quality of life projects, which are primarily the zoo, traffic, and neighborhood projects, as well as public safety. Just want to quickly highlight on our general obligation bond debt. This, as you can see, is on a downward trend, and that is consistent with our CIP policy and with our debt policy as well. So next, I want to, if there are any questions on those slides, we'll jump into some highlighted projects. I'll invite Jason Peak, our Public Works Director, to come up and talk about several of our street and facilities projects. And
Does the body have any questions at this point in time? No? Okay.
Thank you, Nick, and good evening, governing body. As Nick said, I'm going to highlight some of the projects that Public Works manages within the CIP. And the first area we wanted to talk about is our neighborhood projects. This includes basically our SORT projects, the stages of resource targeting, as well as some of the housing projects administered through our CDBG funds through the Department of Neighborhood Relations. Within this program from 2019-2028, this is a joint effort between 3 departments within the city. Basically, it starts in neighborhood relations with applications from our NIAs for SORT funding. Our planning department then takes that selected neighborhood, develops a neighborhood plan or refreshes an existing neighborhood plan, and that develops a list of infrastructure projects that then is turned over to Public Works to administer. Within this program, you're seeing some highlights from past projects. We have Fremont Street was a project we did over in the Highcrest neighborhood, reconstructed that. We do alley projects, sidewalks, a number of different things that the neighborhoods have input on. And within the CIP, we've actually recommended an increase in GEO bond funding within this neighborhood infrastructure program, going from the allotment of $1.4 million for neighborhood infrastructure to $1.7 million starting in 2020. And that's just to reflect some of the need. We've had utilities projects come into the picture, and other things that we want to be able to implement there. Moving along, we'll talk about facility projects. So our facilities division within Public Works is responsible for the maintenance and care of over 100 facilities that are public facilities for the city. This includes buildings like City Hall, the LEC, the Holiday Building, but even the small exteriors of like pump stations and things like that for the utilities department. We take care of pieces of those. So highlighting that, we talked a lot about this last year, and this project is in process. Total budget was 8.2, but reflecting the 2019 to 2020 22 period, that budget is $6.85 million for the rehab and renovation of City Hall. This is an active project going on. We have a design build team of KBS Construction as well as trainer architects assisting us in basically what we call the programming phase right now. So figuring out how we put the building back together with all the new mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, and make sure that we take care of this flagship building for the city of Topeka. So street projects, we spend a lot of time outside of this process talking to you about street projects, and this represents a combination of different funding sources from general obligation bonds to citywide half-cent sales tax. If you recall from previous presentation earlier this year, we talked about that the citywide half-cent sales tax makes up the lion's share of our street maintenance funding. As Nick alluded, that current sales tax expires in 2019. We'll be coming back to you in April with a discussion item to talk about renewal of that sales tax. And the projects listed in 2019 include continuation of Southeast Adams from 33rd to 37th, Southwest Gage from 25th to 29th, and Chesney Park would be a complete kind of mill and overlay throughout the Chesney Park neighborhood, similar to what we're doing in Central Park. And that's just highlighting some of the street projects within the half-cent sales tax. Another portion of our street project funding comes from the countywide sales tax, and just a reminder, this sales tax program identifies very specific projects. So on that voter ballot, there were specific projects with specific limits that we work in. One of the ones we wanted to highlight was the Southwest 17th, and I just want to reemphasize this project goes from McVicker to I-470. That's almost 3 miles of roadway through a very developed area. In 2019, we'll be using that funding to start a planning phase, basically looking at utility needs, looking at the phasing and coordination with other construction projects, and what makes the most sense to start working on those segments over that 3 mile corridor. We anticipate about 3 separate construction projects coming out of that, and that construction starting in 2023. Actually, I just want to highlight one other thing. So we highlight Southwest 17th, but what's important to note is we also have Southwest 12th Street is in there in that same period of time. We've got some other projects that we're trying to coordinate within that countywide, and we work with our utility partners to make sure we're doing all that work at one time. As Nick said, currently we show continuation of the citywide half-cent sales tax. We just thought that important to reflect continuation of that citywide sales tax in the CIP because it's such a core piece of our funding for improving the condition of our streets. So at present, the way it's reflected in the city, in the CIP is keeping the street projects, the curb and gutter, the alley, the ADA, all the programs that we currently do just rolled forward for another 10-year period at the same funding levels. But of course, like I said, we'll come back to you in April and talk about what's the appetite of the body for renewal of that program. The other project I wanted to highlight, so the excess from the countywide half-cent sales tax last year that you appropriated, that almost $10 million, we talked about fitting that into the pavement management program. And as we've kind of shifted from a very project-specific focus, but talking about a program that raises our overall PCI condition, one of the key components of that is keeping our good roads good, letting all this work that we've done, making sure that we sustain that in a good condition. This map in front of you shows the city kind of divided into 3 areas. We currently, the central area, the light gray portion, we've completed the crack sealing work in that. We started that last fall in 2017, and in 2018, those roads will be getting what we call a full width surface seal or microsurfacing, and basically to buy us 10 years of extended life on those streets. At the same time that we're doing that full width surface seal, the eastern half of the city, so it reaches up to the north and the east, we'll be addressing another 75 miles of roadway with crack sealing in fall of 2018, and then as we move into 2019, have that same full width surface sealing program coming through. And then basically repeat that process in the western half of the city. And we anticipate that expending all the countywide half-cent sales tax dollars that were allocated to us. And so that concludes kind of the public works portion, highlighting some of those projects. I'd stand for any questions that you may have on those. Yes, ma'am.
Jason, thank you. I do have a question. If you go back to the portion of the $48 million that are coming in from the half-cent sales tax, that we're going to have a conversation with regards to, you know, whether the council has an appetite for going ahead and doing that. One of the things that I have heard from constituents as I've been talking to people in the community is their frustration of, you know, we have been doing a lot of work on the roads, but a lot of people wanted to see sidewalks, or were concerned about the infrastructure that was under the roads. And there had been a history in the past of we would repair a street, but because we didn't have those funds tied to infrastructure, we would have to go back to it. Do we have an idea on what it would take, as we are really having this discussion, to really make a significant impact for our residents with regards to funding? And how critical is it for us to provide our constituents what they've been asking us for us to renew this?
So Mayor, we do have kind of a ballpark estimate. I don't have that number with me, but I'll be glad to get you what that additional cost. We have about 90 miles of roadway that are what we would call a rural section roadway, meaning they don't have curb and gutter or stormwater system. So when you think about, I mean, that's a significant amount of roadway. We've done some ballpark estimates of what that would be, and it would exceed what we're currently bringing in with the current citywide half-cent sales tax. And just to reemphasize, when we came to you the previous month and talked about that citywide funding, that current level of funding in the program allocations is not sufficient to keep us at that $24.4 million annually that to achieve that PCI goal of 60 that the mayor and council have put in the budget priorities. So we can come back to that number and present that information to you in April, what that would look like. I think for purposes of the CIP, we kept it at the current recommendation because we've not had input from the body on that. Want to make sure that we are. And just think in a timing perspective, you'll get to talk about the same CIP process again in 2019. And we can also make adjustments at that time as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Any other, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. So I know the study for the interchange on South California into 470, or I'm sorry, it is 470, is in the 2023 CIP. I'm wondering, is it wise to wait that long to do that? I know KDOT is starting to ramp up now that their budgets are a little bit better, but that would put that project, you know, nearly a decade down the road by the time we got the study done and then they got in the funding cycle for KDOT. I'm wondering, should that be sooner?
So Councilman, what I'd say is we looked at the CIP and kind of putting a heavy emphasis on maintenance and maintaining what we have. That's what kind of drove our decision-making and putting it in 2023. But we're definitely open to suggestion or direction from council on that. And it's the Southeast 29th Street KTA
yes, I'm
interchange.
Sorry. That's right. I forget we'd moved it around from California to 29th a couple times. Have you had any more discussions with KDOT on that as to if they have any kind of visibility into their future spending plans in that area?
We have not.
Okay.
I think the conversation has just been that if we're willing to fund it, they're willing to operate it. Okay. And, you know, it has a pretty significant price tag.
Yes, yes it does. Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Peak, I also share my colleague's concern that I would like, if all possible, if we can move funding around to at least get the planning so it's, you know, I guess to use a term from a few years ago, shovel ready. So when the funding is there, I know it's currently not there as I understand it, but But what I will ask you on the next slide, if you wouldn't mind going to your last, I think it was your last slide that showed the 3 sections of town. Just so I don't misunderstand you, they've already got the crack sealing done in the central area there. And this year they're going to do a full width microsurfacing, but is that every street?
Not, it's the majority of those colored streets. There's some streets that basically are in good enough condition, the crack seal is sufficient, but the majority of the streets will also get basically the crack seal gets the visible cracks, and that full width surface seal basically catches the remaining cracks that you can effectively treat with a crack seal treatment.
Okay. And just to follow up if I could. And now then next year, this fall, you're going to start out in the north and east part, do crack sealing, and then the following year, the same thing on the microsurfacing of streets there.
Yes.
And could you just briefly say, and I don't think we have this, do we? We can't tell what the colors are.
So, sorry, just a reminder, those are basically reflecting the overall PCI condition of the streets. So the green are the good roads, the yellow are the streets with a PCI that's in a fair condition, and then the red that's in the central districts, those streets were just within a poor condition, but as we go out and we physically look at it, it made sense to add those as part of the crack sealing program.
So if someone asks us if their street's going to get micro-sealed this year or next, is there a way we can tell them that, or?
I mean, we can print you, if you want a physical list of that 75 miles of roadway, each individual street segment, we can provide that.
That would be fantastic. I mean, an email would be fine on that.
Sure.
We just get a lot of individual questions from people that, when is my street getting?
Sure.
So, thank you very much.
Yep.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I will probably have some more questions, I should warn you. I did my deep dive into the building inspection stuff last week, so I don't feel as prepared tonight as I'd like to be, but I do have some right now. For me, optimizing the money to do our street plan is critical out of the budget as well as out of the, obviously most of that's in the CIP as well. And I personally for those of you who are new, I get very concerned about what we bond versus what we're spending cash for. For every 1.3 million that we bond, let's say, that's 400,000 in costs at 30%. We go back and forth on this. And so I want to make sure we get things done. And so some of the questions I have, most of them drive to money on all of this. Regarding the half-cent plan, something that concerned me that happened, for those of you who are new, a couple of years ago, was it used to be that curb and gutter was in there at $500,000 a year. It got bumped up to 1.5 million at one point, and the language that it was okay to use that money for snow and ice removal got added. And to me, that is not capital, that is operating, and I understood why that happened at the time. I see that that language has reappeared. I just can't imagine, unless we put snow and ice removal on the ballot, that the voters are going to want to vote the half-cent sales tax for snow removal, but it would be a good way to get the conversation done. My question then is there a plan between Public Works and Finance to get 100% into the operating budget the dollars that we need for snow removal so that it can disappear from the capital budget?
Mr. Mayor and Councilwoman, I'll try to take this, and I have
Okay.
kind of a generic answer, and that is, as you know, a couple years ago, this was thoroughly vetted by legal and approved by the body at the time, and so that's the policy under which we have operated. We felt comfortable with that guidance, and so unless we're given different guidance from this body, that's how we would proceed. But obviously, anything we add into the operating budget has to come from somewhere, and there's choices to be made.
I understand that, and I just want us to all be thinking about that now, because to me, I didn't vote for it back then. We have talked about it because I keep bringing it up. But, when we make decisions about things that we want to do, there's only so much money. And we needed money for streets, and if $1 million a year is getting taken out of the half-cent citywide half-cent sales tax now, and if it gets proposed that way, we look at this and we say we've got that much money on the table for streets, but it's not available if it gets spent on something else. So it does concern me. Thank you for the.
Sure, if I could just add a clarification
Okay.
on the operational side. So we do have the flexibility to use that curb and gutter money for snow and ice, but the intent is we hold it as a reserve. So if we don't spend it, it goes directly into curb and gutter programs. We start the year out with kind of a $500,000. This is our project limit. As we make it through a snow season, then we can allocate more money to that, but still keep some in reserve as we kind of get in, the other winter season hits us at the end of our operating budget year, November and December. So have to be conservative in how we plan for that.
And if I may follow that with a question, is there a way for us to get a financial report that would show how much of the money got spent on curb and gutter and how much got spent on snow and ice?
Yes, we can do that.
Is there? I would like to see that, thank you. Also, if I could ask another, regarding the city hall renovations and the roughly $2 million a year, totaling 6.8. Forgive me if this was asked and answered before, but of that, are we really expecting that we're going to have to pay for all of that? We have a tax credit application pending, right? What's our hope in terms of how that number, is that our share or is that the total?
So just our thought process, we budgeted the full amount of the cost because you have to flow that money out up front.
Right.
We will apply for tax credits upon completion of the project. So we're going through that process, making sure we're eligible for tax credits. And then that refund would come back to the city, but it's not reflected in that project budget. So it could be used basically to pay down the debt service on that, or it would just.
And it'd be up to 80%, but maybe not of 100% of those expenses, is that?
So we may have expenses that are not eligible. Like I said, Trainer Architects is an expert in this. They're helping us work through. If carpet is glued down, it's eligible. If carpet has tax strips at the edge, it's not eligible for a tax credit. So a lot of fine details of how we figure out what's tax credit eligible. And we'll know that as we get further through design and then ultimately know what the return is at the end of the project and when we put the credits out on the market for sale. Someone has to buy the credits in order for us to get a return. It's not a guarantee on that, so.
But it could, I realize the number isn't a hard number yet, but could be as much as 5 million of that 6.8? No?
Councilwoman, I think that's unlikely it would be that high, as Mr. Peak has said, that there's a lot of costs associated with this project that simply won't be eligible for reimbursement.
Yeah, I don't want to give you a number because we're working through the process, and what I can assure you is we're trying to maximize that tax credit potential, but we do have to modernize the building and think about, we're going to do this project and it's probably be 40 years at least before we touch City Hall. And if you think about how things have changed just in the last 10 years, just imagine how City Hall may operate 40 years from now. And so we're trying to think about the flexibility and use of that space to be ready for a long-term continued service as our flagship building for the city of Topeka.
I think that's great. Did you say it might be 4 years before we actually started doing the work?
No, so we're in the programming phase. Potentially, we could be ready for construction in July of this year. And so we've been working with finance to just talk about the bonding strategy, how we put that out. And if the best case would be that we do the entire project starting this year, but we've got a lot of details to work through.
I'll have some others, but go ahead.
Thank you. Councilwoman Clear.
A couple, if I may. Back to the pavement management project. Remind me about, because I noticed there's no streets way up north, and I know some of those are like reduced down to gravel. Did they count those streets when they went around the ones that are this wide and have, and almost.
Yes, ma'am. So we did count all the streets. What this reflects is, I know you don't have color copies at your station, but you can see the color up here. So this is what we call preventative maintenance work. So this is the equivalent of an oil change on your car and making sure we do that in a timely fashion. So it just really reflects working on those streets that we get the most return on that investment of crack sealing. So those streets that are in really poor condition, the most cost-effective strategy is to rebuild those.
Okay.
And those are typically the specific projects you see listed in the GEO bond or either that citywide half-cent maintain and improve streets. So when we talk about Southeast Adams or North Kansas between Morse and Soldier Creek is one of the 2019 citywide half-cent sales tax projects that does just more intensive work, mill and overlay, and like I said, reconstruction.
But there's like a whole little neighborhood up there. It's not just one big street. So
Yeah.
how do you do like a whole little neighborhood?
So we try to look and, as we do the programming for this, get in and say, okay, well, we really need to do this on this street. It's contiguous within the neighborhood, so does that become a neighborhood project like Chesney Park or Central Park or some of the mill and overlay jobs that we did in 2016 throughout neighborhoods in Topeka. And we'll package those as a complete project. The other driving factors on those neighborhoods is utility condition. How much underground utility work do we need to do? If we need to do a lot, then it's probably not a wholesale neighborhood project just because of the scale and scope of the utilities, and make sure it aligns with what the utility department has as far as priorities.
And when do you do that? Is that like a CIP thing, or when would you look
Yes,
at the
ma'am.
whole
So
neighborhood?
we actually, believe it or not, we started coordination on this CIP proposal in September of 2017, and we have basically the utilities engineers and public works engineers come together through a series of meetings saying, hey, here's what we're planning for the next 5 years. Let's sit down and talk and see where we can align those projects, and then some that we can't align, we may need to defer. River Road was one of the projects that utilities is working on, the Ash Street force main replacement. We were identifying that as a potential pavement removal in 2019. We said time out, let's get that utility work done, and then, and come after the utility work is done. It wouldn't make sense for us to be in there, build a new road, and then have them come tear it up.
Right.
So we start our planning coordination process very early. That all gets submitted to finance in December, and then we start, packaging all this together, and then finally, here we are in March presenting it to you all in the public.
Well, I also want to say, I want to make sure I understand, with the I-470 exit, we have to give up something for that. I mean,
So if we want to move that earlier, there is a council policy on the geo-bonding authority, and that's where that project resides. So if it wants to move earlier, we've got to do some shifting with other projects
Right.
within the geo-bond. That's
right.
accurate.
So it's not just as easy to say, hey, we really need to move this up. That means we've got to move something back. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this side? Okay. Councilwoman Hiller, you said that you had a few more questions?
Yes, I do, thank you. Sustainability initiatives. I saw something in really out years, but could you talk, we had a Vermont energy plan that involved doing the buildings as well as the lighting, especially in HVAC. I think you're accommodating some of that as we go along. Could you just talk about how we're accommodating that?
Sure. So the way that we're accommodating sustainability, so the City Hall building renovation, a lot of those recommendations in the Vermont Energy Study will be part of that renovation project. And that was one of those kind of trade-off decisions we made to make funding for City Hall renovation, was pushing that sustainability project out. What I can tell you within the operational level, things that we're doing, when we can afford to do things within our operating budget, we're implementing those sustainability recommendations. Last year, we completed LED light replacement in our fleet garages. We started with the fire fleet garage, doing an LED light project there, and then moved through the others. So what to say is we're taking kind of a balanced approach of knocking out some of these critical CIP projects. Sustainability is important, but just doing it through other means as opposed to a wholesale project that we replace all the lights in our building, but then we haven't addressed our MEP and other needs that we have within our facilities. Roofs being a critical item. We've got to protect that outside envelope in a lot of these facilities, and that's kind of where we've put our priorities on the facility projects.
City Manager.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hiller, I'm also right now I met with the Sustainability Board once and went through and was informed regarding the energy policy that was established 8 years ago. And there were some decisions relative to some goals that were put in there. And right now I have staff looking at where we're at in accomplishing those goals so that we can understand where we're at in the process and then be able to look at what other projects we maybe need to be considering or modifying our goal, depending on which direction we're going to go.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I was on the council when that came back, and had just been elected, so 8 years ago, and most of the savings to the city was in the replacement of the lights. And the reason that they explained as we kind of went along back then that we weren't just doing the lights, either with our existing staff or otherwise, was that the HVAC stuff was very expensive and didn't have quite the same return. And so to me now especially now that we're getting some of those big ticket HVAC things into building projects, that simply working on a plan of buying whatever number of light fixtures we need and just having the maintenance crew 2 days a month just trade out lights so we're getting some of that savings seemed to make sense rather than just waiting. And one reason I asked. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you both. I'm glad you've met with them.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Peak?
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we'll highlight a few other projects before we get to the next steps portion. So I want to look at some quality of life projects. So these are primarily, I think, in fact, all zoo projects. One that I'll highlight is the Zoo Master Plan, funded primarily through private donations. About $8.8 million of the $12 million total you see on this slide is from private donations. Another 3.25 from the countywide half-cent sales tax. This covers a number of different projects: Camp Cowabunga, an elephant reserve, tiger trails, and the giraffe canopy. Overall total for that project is about $14.1 million. About 2.8 of that is in previous funding. A few other public safety projects that I'll highlight. One, this is actually kind of a hybrid capital / operating program. That's the police department fleet replacement. $650,000 per year. Cash funded through their operations. If you remember last year during the excess funds discussion that we had, we paid for a lease payment for police fleet leasing for about $222,000. That was the last lease payment for that, and now they are pay-as-you-go funding from this point on, and so that will replace 24 vehicles on an annual basis. We also have funding for fire station renovations. This is about $450,000 a year. Again, this is a cash-funded project, and the decision was made a few years ago to start focusing on one fire station at a time and doing renovations that way. So kitchen updates, locker room updates, general renovations like that. Currently, we're working on Fire Station 3. That was part of the CIP bus tour. I believe the next in line is Fire Station 11 in North Topeka. And that will start in 2019. And then last project that I want to highlight on here is our infill sidewalk and pedestrian master plan. GO bond funded, $600,000 a year. You can see the pictures you have up here of Northeast Quincy and Southeast 29 that shows some of the work that's been done there, putting in sidewalks where there haven't been, or widening in some cases. A few that are on the list: Central Park, East Topeka North, South Topeka Boulevard, and Elmhurst are a few examples of some upcoming projects. And again, there's a kind of a heat map that Planning Department uses to look at where those needs are and prioritizing those projects. So, these are just, again, some of the projects that we have. Again, tonight we focused on GEO bond and those other non-utility fund projects. Next week we'll be highlighting utility projects. And then the following meeting, April 3rd, would be considering a resolution. If there aren't any outstanding questions, or if there's anything that you're not comfortable with, obviously, that date is tentative, but right now we have planned for April 3rd for adoption. But if there are any questions you have on the projects that we've presented this evening, happy to answer those. We're also keeping track of all the questions that we maybe didn't get definitive answers on today, and we'll work to get responses to those next week. But we want to make sure that you're as comfortable with the CIP as possible, and stand for any questions.
Thank you, Nick. I don't see any questions coming from the body. We do, however, have somebody signed up for public comment. Mr. Joseph Ledbetter.
Evening, governing body. I have some concerns I'd like to put on the record about this capital implementation plan. Obviously, the first one I've had, and I've sent this in an email, is the timing of the Kansas Turnpike Authority interchange in southeast Topeka. I'd like that to be moved forward at least several years. I don't think you're going to get a positive response from any other side until they see you make an effort to at least do the design work and show that you're interested in it. And moving it out 5 years is like eternity in public budgeting. And I would point out that at Highcrest, when I was president over there, we got $11 million worth of infrastructure within several years. I don't see why this $500,000 is that big a lift for a budget this size to move it up to maybe 2020. Let's get the lobbyists involved, let's get the chamber involved, let's get other bodies and other groups, JADO involved, and let's do some lobbying. Let's do some serious lobbying and make this project happen. It's only an $18 million project. I mean, that is minuscule compared to the size of the budgets we're looking at here tonight. And we're talking about spending $6.8 million just on City Hall, with a contingency of, I think it's $500,000. I'd like to know a lot more detail about where that money is going to be spent before you approve that. And I think it's only fair to ask those tough questions up front. I would love to see this California project moved up at least another year. It's put out to, let me look here, 2022. But I mean, that's a heavy lift to move $5 million versus $500,000. But I will tell you the history of California is that there was 10 years it was moved backwards. They did not do the project. I don't know why. I certainly wasn't up here lobbying, but it got moved back. So I came back up as Highcrest president several years ago and started lobbying again to get that project on track. Now, one of the things that I'm going to mention, and it may step on some toes, but I would tell you that your repairs and the things you're doing with city roads, timelines on construction projects, you need to pay a lot more attention to that in coming years. It's costing a lot more money when these projects go into multi-years, when they should have been finished 1 year and they're pushed back to another year. I've been told that adds as much as 20% to the additional cost. I've also been told by other entities, not the city of Topeka, that when you repair these potholes, they should hold up for a minimum of a year, and you should not be getting callbacks on the same problem week after week and month after month. Is my time going that fast? Wow. I haven't been up here in a while. Okay. So I do want to discuss did the comments from this Futures 2040 get put into the CIP? Because there were people there putting their comments into the record of this study that was done several months ago about the KTA project and that they wanted that done. And I know I certainly showed up to, I think it was at least 3 meetings. Were those comments merged into these comments so you, the council people, can see them? I'd like to know that. The half-cent citywide sales tax was passed in April '09, and it doesn't run out till October of 2019. So it's not like this is going to run out tomorrow. But I think we have not had proper time to vet some of that. I'm going to ask for an extension of 3 minutes,
Councilman Lesser?
if I could. 3 minutes, sir.
3. Second.
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. We could please vote.
We have 9 yes.
Proceed, Mr.
Thank
Ledbetter.
you. I want to put this into the record. This is a letter about the KTA project from a very esteemed developer, Tom Peterson, and he wrote this 2 years ago, but it's still relevant. If you would put that in the record and have a copy for each of the governing body and the manager, I'd appreciate that. I'm in several groups that are talking about East Topeka and the need to get more development on the east side, and that has, it appears, chamber support and JADO support. So one of the things I want to point out to you, how important economic development is, and I believe that's a good use of our infrastructure for targeting that. I just want to hand out to you a graph that shows the GDP of our county over the last 11 years, where we had a negative 6% growth, and telling you that projects like the Southeast Topeka and 29th in California are important to future development. And I've talked to at least one developer that's interested in doing hotels and things on that side of town, but we've got to have the entry-exit for the 30,000 people that would serve in that part of the city and county. What I want to hand out now is a newspaper article from several years ago where we actually played a role in this. We actually had, if I could have that for the record, and one for each of the governing body and the manager. We had town hall meetings on the 2014 sales tax, which was countywide. And when you're doing these CIP budgets, remember, you're now getting an additional, it looks like $7.5 million into the city budget from the countywide sales tax that you did not have several years ago. So that also is added into this. It's not just your half-cent sales tax. You're getting other money from other sources that are new. We had meetings in November 4th of 2013. We had meetings in April 17th of 2014, and we had meetings in April 21st of 2014. Before these initiatives were put on the ballot, people got to pick projects that they wanted to see. Whether it was in the east side or the west side of this city, this community, people got to vote on actual projects. And I think that increased the participation of the voters. It made the voters a lot more amenable to such a sales tax. And I want to pass out a copy of that resolution because it specifically lists a lot of city projects. If you put one of those in the record and pass those to the governing body, I'd appreciate it, and city manager. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I think that's the way you do a sales tax. You let the public have input about what they want. Have at least 3 town hall meetings, well publicized, and let the public speak about what they want in the future on a sales tax. Maybe I'll come back next week, we'll see. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
And thank you for the additional time.
The body did not seem interested in having further discussion on the item. I'm just looking one more time. At this point in time, we will proceed with announcements, if the city clerk would read.
For the March 20th agenda, we have no proclamations at this time. We have 2 presentations, Shawnee County Health Rankings, and then a Topeka Police Department reorganization. We have one board appointment to the Topeka Human Relations Commissions. We have a special event and noise exception for Eagle Cruise Night, an expenditure ordinance for February, a resolution conditional use permit for the Topeka Public Library regarding extension of a parking lot. And we have continued discussion on the CIP and 2019 budget priorities.
City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. First item I have is that you did notice that we're not going to be considering the IBC, IFC, and ILSC codes at the last meeting in March. We're going to move that back to April 3rd. We received some information from Councilwoman Hiller that we're trying to work through. Want to make sure that we can set up a meeting with her in order to vet those issues, and then we'll bring it back at the April 3rd meeting. Also, my last comment is a reminder that the budget open house is tomorrow night at 5:30 to 7 at the Shawnee County Public Library.
Thank you very much. I have 3 quick things. First of all, thank you for the group that was starting to talk about the TIF project, the policy. The one thing that I will ask that group to consider as you're having your meetings and discussing this is that our community has had discussions with regards to, when you look at Momentum 2022 and everything that we're trying to accomplish, about economic prosperity that's equal. So we're talking about equality. And as we're looking at that, I would urge you to consider how we could, I spoke with City Manager about this, but this is not a surprise for him, but how we could talk about adding some component of, if a developer is requesting a tax incentive, then how do we go ahead and capture some funds so that we could move it into neighborhoods that need it, so that we can do development in different areas of our community. So that way that our whole community wins as we're providing these incentives. So just a little bug for you guys to consider. There's many ways of doing this, whether it's a grant, because nobody likes to talk about fees, but there's many methods that we could utilize. Second, I want to say thank you to Councilwoman Rivera, Mayor Diosa in Central Falls, Mayor Elorza in Providence, Rhode Island, and to Secretary of State Nelly Gorbea. One of my commitments has been to be in touch with different people who are nationwide looking at issues that we are looking at as a community. And I had the great opportunity this weekend to spend some time with them. They were amazing hosts. I was given the key to the city of Central Falls in Rhode Island. So it was a wonderful experience to discuss with them what initiatives they're doing in the areas of public safety, what developments they're doing in the areas of economic development. And by the way, they were very impressed at our Momentum 2022 discussion. And finally, shameless plug, my birthday is on Monday. And he's like, yeah, she's celebrating her own birthday. Well, the only reason that I'm saying that is because I've often talked about how I would love our city to be a community that is already a giving community and that supports things. And I am raising funds and awareness to 3 causes that if you want to partake in and support. The island of Puerto Rico has gone not only through a hurricane, but it has also gone through some really severe waves that have destroyed the tourism area. As you know, I was raised in Puerto Rico, so I'm turning 42. I'm hoping to raise $4,200 for my birthday by Monday. In addition to that, we have 2 great organizations that are very dear to my heart. We have the Center for Safety and Empowerment, the YWCA, trying to raise $1,000 for them for their causes to eradicate sexual and domestic violence. And the third, and certainly not least cause, is the rescue mission. That ties very well with that mission. A lot of the victims of domestic violence and sexual violence are because they're being trafficked. And the rescue mission is waging war against human trafficking in our community and in our nation. So in that effort, I'm also trying to support them. If you have any questions on how to get connected with giving, I would encourage you to visit Michelle for Topeka, which is your mayor's Facebook page, so that you can look at the information there. And if you feel moved to give, do so. And if you want to share that post, please do so to see if we could get that goal accomplished. Councilman Mays. Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to invite the council out to come march in the parade. My girls and me will be carrying the banner at the front of the parade. So we'll see you out there.
Councilman Lesser.
2 things real quick. Congratulations to our state champion Hayden High School Wildcats on their state championship in 4A Division II. And then secondly, I just want to say what a neat honor for Marge and Barney Heaney. I'm an old Assumption grade school kid, so I remember her son Dan was a classmate of mine. So I have many, many wonderful Marge stories, so what a fantastic person. So very well-deserved honor.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you. I want to echo the various invitations about St. Patrick's Day. That is a great day to get out. It's free. It's great. You see people walking in from literally miles around, parking in places they didn't know even existed, and hiking in and spending time for the day. It's a great day. Everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day in Topeka. The other thing, I just want to mention one other thing. I've continued to have some discussions with County Appraiser Bauman because issues had been raised from different council districts about whether there was consistency within our city or appropriate valuations where our neighborhoods had been improved. Maybe there hadn't been a lot of sales, but there had been a lot of investment on the part of people privately as well as the city. And then from District 7, before you were elected, comments about whether the appraisals of new developments within the city limits were the same as developments outside. And he is looking into that, which I really appreciate. So if people have anecdotal stories that might, I'm happy to pass them on, but that could give him some direction for a place to look. If people have raised questions to you, I think he's very open to that. Because of course our property tax appraisals and therefore our revenue are important to us. And our value to our neighborhoods. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Clear.
This isn't in my district, but I went to Fellowship Church, and that's where I heard this. So, High Crest Fellowship Church is having their Sunday service this Sunday at Avondale East at 11 o'clock. So, feel free to go and worship at that new church.
Awesome. And if you stay after, you get to have cupcakes with the mayor. Councilman Emerson.
And if you come early, I'm going to be doing the parking for the first 2 weeks, so
Oh, baby.
that'll be even better. No. Yeah, that is going to be a fantastic deal over there. It's in what was the Net Reach Center, so we're looking forward to participating in that. Just wanted to give a shout out. This gentleman does not live within the city, but he is a local boy. This past week, a local man now, but a Navy Lieutenant Commander Dan Knassen won an Olympic gold medal last week in the Paralympics, and just an impressive guy, a Navy SEAL commander, a Harvard graduate, and just a great local person. So congratulations, Lieutenant Commander Knassen.
Councilman Padilla. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I want to encourage everyone to have an incredibly safe time on Saturday. I know that this is a wonderful event that everybody is very excited for, but please celebrate it safely. Don't drink too much green beer. And also, I want to encourage everyone to come out to the Blarney Breakfast Saturday morning. It's a great fundraiser, and I will be there.
Thank you very much. We have two individuals signed up for public comment, the first one being Virginia Mendez.
I'm here tonight. I have to stand alone because this man in our neighborhood has threatened everybody so much, and it's not a safe place to live. I do believe in my heart of hearts that our home should be a safe place to go and to fall, whoever we are. We create our home, whoever we are, to go home and feel safe there. And that's the way I want my neighborhood to feel. Okay, I'm a mandated reporter for people who try to molest children, and this is the way this scenario all started. My next door neighbor tried to expose himself to my 5-year-old grandson. The next couple of days, it was the children walking to school, and I had to report him. Okay, he says I lied. I didn't. I wouldn't make up such a story about anyone. And it does affect children. I was a psychiatric nurse for 19 years of my nursing career. I taught nursing here and helped open up both intensive care units in this town. I have fought for the mentally ill. I have fought to get the standards of care raised at both hospitals and for the whole city. I want the neighborhood where I live to be safe. Well, this man, he got angry with me. He tried to sexually assault me on September the 21st of 2016. My self-defense training kicked in, And I told him, I grabbed those big heavy keys car keys out of my pocket, and I said, he was right in my face, I said, and trying to strangle me, and I said, you get one little bit closer to me and you're getting this. And I poked him toward his eyes, and then about that time I kicked him in the privates. He left. Then I called the police. This man and his wife told the police officer who went to talk to him that I lay around drunk and on drugs all the time. I do not do any such thing. I do not do drugs, and I do not drink alcohol. There isn't even one drop of alcohol in my house. Okay, then this scenario continues, and he goes down the street threatening to get an assault rifle and kill us all. He hates everybody in the neighborhood. He threatens his wife. He threatens to kill her. He tries to kill his dog. I'm calling the police, and they say he has a right to have assault rifles. He has a right to go down the street shooting a gun at random. He has a right to have an arsenal of guns in his house. Not when you have restraining orders against you. You are not supposed to have guns in your house. There's a state law against it. Okay, so the next time the police come out, he and his wife tell him that I've been hospitalized 6 times in 4-point restraints, mind you, and everything for hallucinations and delusions, and that I made up all these stories, that I taught nursing at Stormont Vale, that I worked and helped open the ICU unit at St. Francis before that I worked in a research hospital in Chicago where we developed Cytoxin that's still used today, and all of this. And then the city police officer, Sergeant Clam, comes out, and he's going to help me get treatment for my delusions and hallucinations, let me tell you. And I want proof where I've been hospitalized in 4-point restraints, because I have never been hospitalized for a mental illness. I have had depression, but I didn't let it get control of my life. And I go and I get counseling because they've tried all the medicines, antidepressants, and I have some reaction to them. Now the police tell me I have to stay in the house and stay away from them. I'm not going to isolate myself in my house. And this man, he's still going around threatening to kill everybody, tried to run over me with his car. Well, the next time he does that, he tries to use his car as a lethal weapon. I'm calling the police department, and I do expect something to be done. I don't want them telling me. And he came home one time last spring with a human head with fresh blood on it and a human skull, and I called the police department, and I was told I was hallucinating.
Thank you for your comments, Ms.
And,
Mendez.
you know, something needs to be done about this man, because it's just a tragedy waiting to happen. And there's a school right down the street, Stout School, and you don't know whether he's going to have a gun and shoot at everybody or not.
Thank you, Ms. Mendez.
That's ridiculous.
Next person signed up to speak is Ms. Rose Welch. She's not in. There is not an executive session. That being said, we complete our agenda. The meeting is adjourned.
So that joke in prison.